those years.
All right, what is something about you that most people do not know?
Well, probably most people aren't aware of my days in a band called the Root Doctors. I started a band in college. Actually, it was right after high school. A group called the Root Doctors that are still playing. We did at one time have a Universal record deal to do a 4-record EP, and was successful. Had a great time. I still love music. It's still a part of my life. But in my first life, my life's goal was to be a rock musician and travel the country, and I probably satisfied many of those goals. Got to travel a good bit of the Southeast and had a great time with some wonderful musicians and guys I'm still very close to. So music's always been a big part of my life. I think my wife, when we got married, I had long hair, earrings, playing in a rock band, traveling the country, and I think I pulled a fast one on her because I shaved my head, joined the military, went to law school, and became a politician. So it's not quite the starving musician artist life that she was anticipating, but she stuck with me. So.
Okay, so you did a tour of duty in Afghanistan. Tell us about that experience and how it shaped who you are today.
Probably one of the most rewarding 16 months in my life. I was grateful to serve with some amazing men in some very remote areas of a wonderful country that has some significant challenges. And being in Afghanistan, and particularly some of these small regions, it's definitely had an impact on my life and my family's life and my view of the work that I do. Learned a lot from the men that I've served with and what we're able to accomplish. Learned a lot about differences and how what's most important in life we all share. We might think we're so different in religion and language and culture, and there are differences, but what we care about the most, which is our families and the success of the next generation and a sense of security for our children and their future and educational opportunities. We all care deeply about that, regardless of where we come from, what our religious background is, what our language is. We want a little better slice of life for our children than what we have for ourselves.
Okay, and what has been your most memorable experience as a representative for South Carolina?
Most memorable, there are probably too many to even mention, but because it's been such a rewarding experience, but they're most all good. I'd have to say, first comes to mind is passing First Steps and being with then Governor Hodges when he signed the First Steps to School Readiness. I was privileged to be the primary sponsor of that bill. Worked very hard. It was one of the reasons I ran for office was to improve early childhood education. We were learning a lot about brain development, the importance of the early years and getting children healthy and ready to learn and making sure they have set the best foot forward when they enter first grade. And it was something totally lacking here in South Carolina. We had no significant statewide effort. Other states like North Carolina and Georgia were much further along in making that a priority, and we needed that here in South Carolina. So seeing that pass was a big event. I'd also say getting the $1 billion for schools. We did a $1 billion bond. We won by one vote in the House. It's a great example of it making a difference when you're there fighting for something. But it was the first major investment by the state in bricks and mortar for our schools since Jimmy Burns was governor. And it was a big step forward. It actually transformed many of these institutions, wonderful schools that have been in horrific conditions and needed upgrades and weren't fit to inhabit, much less to teach students in. So it was a big step forward in improving education in some areas of our state, and it's great to be a part of that.
Okay, and kind of going off of that, what issues are most important to you?
I got started education, public education, strengthening, reforming, improving opportunities for our children was number one. But I find myself caring about so many areas of our state, and I find myself often involved in many different debates. But so I've been heavily involved in a lot of the environmental and conservation efforts, from establishing the infrastructure, well, not the infrastructure bank, but the conservation bank. Also worked to establish the infrastructure bank as well and leverage resources to improve our infrastructure, which helps increase economic activity. Been a long-time advocate representing the heart of the city and the University of South Carolina. Higher ed has been near and dear to my heart ever since I was a student at Carolina and working with student government to improve support for higher ed in our state. Certainly veterans issues I tend to be heavily involved in, and making sure we honor the service of our veterans and their families and keep faith with them as they've kept faith with us, and that's always been very important to me. So there are a lot of areas that I think South Carolina needs to focus on and improve, and I've been grateful to play a small role with many others in helping to move the state forward.
Okay, so why did you decide to run for office, and tell us a little bit about your first campaigning experience?
You know, it was one of those moments where I had been working for years, carrying the ice for fundraisers and tending bar for other candidates and putting out yard signs all through college. And I first went to work at the State House for my House member, Tim Rogers, and was so impressed by his dedication to service and what he did and the way he was committed to his constituents. I'm very inspired by him, and was very surprised one day when he said that he made the decision that he was not going to run. And he called me and he asked if I would run. I was just freshly out of law school, just started my first position at a local law firm. And I could think of 13 people that ought to run before me. And so I got on the phone a little uncertain about it, and called others and urged them to run, and they all seemed to say, well, no, we think you ought to think about running. And I always had a passion for our state and for service. I was involved in Guardian Ad Litem program and doing a lot of volunteer efforts, and thought maybe that would come at some time in my life, but maybe not that soon. But once with support of family and friends and came together, and certainly a passion for service. Worked very hard against some pretty heavy odds and survived a campaign against a wonderful primary opponent who's very well respected, Jim Levinas, and a dear friend, and from a great family. And then my general election opponent was my first cousin, who a guy by the name of Robert Adams, is also a talented, now he works as a lobbyist, and we still get to work very closely together. We grew up together, going hunting together, and we were able to handle it. The family was a little tense at times. Those Thanksgiving dinners were a little bit more heated, but we had no problem being in a dove field with shotguns and pointing them in the right direction of the birds and not each other. So it was all good, and didn't realize it would come from a long history of members who served in both of these houses, and it really wasn't part of the process that motivated me. It was more doing some things about issues that I cared about, like early childhood education. But it's been neat to discover as I've been here some family history in these halls, and it's been wonderful to make connections with that. But it's I can remember the first night when the votes were counted. And I went to the Capitol Cafe, and Lee Bandy, who's one of the greatest political reporters ever, was sitting there. And Lee walked in, and the state newspaper actually endorsed my opponent, my cousin, and everybody said that was a great thing, because the state newspaper endorsements don't typically help. But it proved to be the case that day because I was successful. But we sat down with Lee and Tim Rogers, and I was writing on a napkin. I was writing all these, list of all the ideas that I've been talking about during the campaign, early childhood. I've come up with a name for this initiative, and Tim goes, what are you doing? I said, well, Tim, I can't believe I'm going to the State House. These are all the ideas of what I'm going to go accomplish, all these great ideas that I'd love to see done. And Tim said, didn't I teach you anything, James? That the State House is no place for great ideas? And I didn't realize how right he was, that, ideas by themselves don't go anywhere. They won't survive a day in the State House. Where I've seen success is where people who care about the future of our state, who care about an initiative or an idea, want to see something happen, get engaged and move this body to act. And that's how great ideas become reality, is when people care about it and work at it. And so that's been a lesson that he taught me early, and it's proved true time and time again.
Okay, so on a typical Saturday, where would we find you?
On a typical Saturday, it changes about every Saturday. I seem to be on the road. My preference is to be with my family, but I have, if it's soccer season, usually a soccer game with my kids. At least one Saturday a month, I'm with the South Carolina Army National Guard. I'm in uniform, and I'm Major Smith, and I'm doing. If we're having a good time, we're on the range firing or driving our Bradleys or tanks around, and that's always, if it's not a good weekend, I'm doing a PowerPoint with the Guard or something like that. But my preference is family, Guard, and then occasionally I've got to get into the office and do some legal work because I've been here all week and haven't been able to get to it during the week. So.
Okay, so you're also a musician, like you've told us. Tell us about how you started with music.
It's just been a love forever. Music is it's an escape in a way for me from everything else that I'm involved in, and it's such a wonderful art form, and I have loved it from the start. And I've had some idols or mentors or people I thought were brilliant in the area, and I realized I could enjoy it and never quite be the virtuoso of a Christopher Berg, who was my guitar teacher, and I learned so much from him. But I got in it really heavy before college, started this band called the Root Doctors, got busy with them, and before long we found we were playing 4 or 5 nights a week and traveling 1,500 miles, 2,000 miles a week, all over the Southeast, and had some of the most amazing experiences with those guys, and wrote some wonderful music together, wonderful original music that's still being played, and actually was successful records for a time. Came up in the same era with Hootie and the Blowfish and many other great bands, and I can remember the many occasions when Hootie used to open up for the Root Doctors. Of course, we played the last. There was this great venue called Green Streets, and I wish we still had it because it was the best place to go watch local music and some bands that would tour through the area. And so it was the 2 bands that played the last night at Green Street. So it was Hootie opened up for us, and then the Root Doctors, and it was a big night. I'll never forget it. Great time, great music, great friends, and so I'm grateful now to be playing again. I've got a group now called The Project, and originally the Project name came because band names are always kind of interesting. We couldn't figure out a name, but I knew we needed to start practicing again because I hadn't picked it up in a while. And so I put like Friday at about 2:30 on my calendar. I just would block it off, and so I just put down The Project. Where's James? What's he doing? I couldn't really say hanging around playing rock and roll and having a cold beer with my friends. So I just put down The Project on the calendar, and that's how we eventually got our name. Was Smith's working on The Project. So now we've been playing for a lot of good charitable organizations that need a good band. We've done work for some environmental groups and for Historic Columbia. We did a little charitable effort this last weekend for the Animal Mission for the Mardi Gras celebration. And so it's a great way to have fun, play music with friends, and raise money for good causes.
Okay, so why should voters vote Democrat this election term?
Well, for every reason that we care about the future of our state when it comes to improving education, when it comes to making sure we have affordable and accessible health care for our citizens, when it comes to preserving our natural heritage for generations to come, and when it comes to fiscally responsible tax structure and competitive tax structure and accountable budgeting. The Democrats in the House and Senate proved time and time again we are the ones working on practical, responsible initiatives that address the challenges that all of our citizens are facing, and we're not sitting around dealing in crazy notions of nullification or open carry of guns. These things are issues that aren't going to move our state forward, aren't going to matter to our citizens in terms of their everyday needs and challenges. And what we want to do is leverage their wonderful talents, gifts, and the resources we have to build a brighter and better future for our state. And Democrats have always had, and continue to have that focus.